Welcome to Psych for Psychology, a Nystrom & Associates podcast. Our host, Brett Cushing, is a licensed marriage and family therapist at Nystrom. Each week, he talks about all things mental health and therapy with guests, and you get a chance to dive into specific psychology topics that help promote personal development and wellness. And now, your host, Brett.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Psyched for Psychology. We're back with another episode today, and we're kind of taking on a very interesting topic, and one that, might be kind of weird to talk about, but I'm really glad we are, and it's about pornography today.
Yes, we're going to take a look at porn, so to speak.
Yes, a very clever title.
As we do that, we are taking a look at porn not as the morality police. That's not our goal. We do know that porn can be problematic in relationships, and so we wanted to highlight that a little bit, talking a little bit about the prevalence of porn, how it can be problematic. Today, we're going to talk specifically about how it can be problematic in intimate relationships, and what do we do? How do we approach this when it becomes problematic?
Totally. I'm glad you said that about we're not the morality police. It's just like any other topic we've taken on. We I think our goal is like to provide information, right? And say, hey, here's some info about this. You can do with it what you will. But it is very relevant to mental health, I think.
Incredibly relevant, yeah.
I think one of the biggest things I've learned about the pornography connection is the chemical aspect. So I'm just going to start in with that because it does chemical things to our brains.
Absolutely, it does.
Time.
Yeah, it really affects the reward center of the brain. And one of the areas where we're a little ahead of ourselves because we're talking about like the problematic part right away, but it really highlights how this can become problematic, just like any other addiction, because there's this activation of the pleasure center of the brain that wants to be rewarded over and over and over again. And sometimes it can take a greater reward than what was needed before.
Right. Yeah, that was a preview of what's to come, talking about the chemical aspect. So that's a teaser. But so the prevalence, where to begin, right? I know one stat that I can't remember where I heard it, but that pretty confidently can say that by the age of 10 is the average age that people are exposed to pornography these days.
Absolutely.
10 years old.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah.
And they really target, we all know we get targeted on our phones and things, and there's all these algorithms that know us better than we know ourselves. And everybody knows that kids are having a lot of hormonal changes and their hormones are off the charts. And they also know that there are certain times they're going to be stressed, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And they really target kids when they're stressed, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, often like right when they come home from school or later at night when they're trying to do their homework. And so these images come to them, and we'll be talking more about that some other future podcasts, but there's evidence that really shows that watching porn regularly when someone is a child or a young adolescent and they continually watch it, it actually inhibits the normal development of the brain. And that's shocking. It's concerning. So we need to talk more about that in another podcast. But it's there and it's happening. But today we're talking a lot about how it happens in our relationships. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about the prevalence of this because it really is prevalent. And I think it's validating that we're talking about this topic because of how prevalent this behavior is, that people watch pornography. So, for instance, one leading pornography website says that people spend 4.5 billion hours on their website.
Wow.
And Psychology Today, in March of 2018, they asked Alexa, so I don't know, how scientific this is, but Alexa seems to know everything. And they found that the leading web traffic tracker says that among the world's tens of millions of sites, Pornhub ranks number 36. Now, They also went on to find that if they eliminate search engines and they eliminate sites based on user-generated content like Facebook, Instagram, Yahoo, and Amazon, if they only focus on sites that publish other content, then Pornhub ranks number 4, only behind Wikipedia, Microsoft, and Netflix.
Whoa. I'm trying to actually wrap my head around that right now.
Right. Yeah. This is a very popular thing. And I don't know about you, when I talk to clients about this, I don't ask if they watch porn. I usually say, so how often do you watch porn?
Sure. And what's the answer you get?
Well, it's more often than quite more frequent. They'll say, well, probably once a week or something like that. And I think people tend to underreport.
Fair enough.
Because there's this shame factor. We'll talk a little bit about that.
Right. Yep.
But it's fascinating. The industry itself is about $100 billion. That's B, not M. $100 billion industry globally. And 40 million Americans regularly visit porn sites.
Okay.
About 25% of search engines' requests are pornography related.
Wow.
Now, that's interesting. That's 1 in 4 search engine searches are for porn. 70% of men aged 18 to 24, they visit pornographic websites at least once a month.
Can you say that again?
Yeah. 70%. So we're talking ages 18 to 24 men.
Thank you. Yeah.
18 to 24. 70% of them visit pornography websites at least once a month.
Okay.
And internet pornography makes up about 20% of total e-commerce sales in the United States. Now, that's significant. This is really a telling indication of the size and scope of the pornography industry in the United States. It shows that pornography really is a major player in the e-commerce market.
Wow.
It's very lucrative. Now, this one is an absolute shocker, I think.
Okay, I'm ready.
So, female-friendly porn, viewership of female-friendly porn. Now we're talking that's really designed more for women, for females in an erotic way.
Mm-hmm.
The viewership of female-friendly porn has risen from the years 2013 to 2017.
Okay.
Viewership for female-friendly porn has risen 1,400%.
Whoa. That's quite a rise.
This is pretty prevalent stuff we're talking about.
Very prevalent stuff.
Absolutely. So, an article in 2023, just recently by Utah University, they really highlighted some more too, that viewing sexually explicit content of pornography has become increasingly commonplace. Research indicated in 2016, they highlighted research that was done that 46% of adult men and 16% of women intentionally view porn in an average week.
Wow.
So that's every other man almost is viewing porn on a weekly basis.
My goodness.
Yeah. And that's really other research I've come across over the years really indicates that that's across the board. It's independent of someone's religious background or ethnic background.
Right.
It's really pervasive across the board.
Wow.
And what's concerning, we're just highlighting the prevalence of this. What's concerning is that it can become very problematic.
Right.
So we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
Well, and so, first of all, I think you covered it well in terms of extremely prevalent, right?
Right. Is it safe to say it's norm when we look at the frequency of this and the prevalence?
Absolutely. And what's kind of striking me just right off the bat is even just thinking about my own work with clients is it's not something that comes up all too often. Now, earlier you had said you tend to ask how often do you view pornography versus do you?
Right.
And so you've adopted that kind of approach because you just know about this prevalence. Is that
the prevalence? Yeah. And it's because it's so prevalent. I'm highlighting when I ask clients how often do you view porn?
Yeah.
I'm trying to come at it from a normal perspective than a moral perspective. I'm trying to normalize that people do this, and I'm not here as the morality police, but And if they're watching porn, I'm not saying, "Oh my goodness, you're terrible."
I stop that right now.
I just know that, like, it's similar. Like, how often do you drink alcohol is another question.
Yep.
I'll ask people,
sure. Mm-hmm.
And it's not like alcohol is problematic for everybody, and it can be. So, sex, I think is a wonderful thing. It's fantastic, but it's a lot like fire. Fire does a lot of really good things. And it's a great, it's a wonderful thing to have in a relationship and to enjoy. I'm talking about fire. Fire, as good as it is, if you go and sit on it, it's going to have some adverse effects. And so with porn, I think just like anything else, when it's utilized in certain ways and its effect on the brain, if it's not considered, can become very problematic for relationships.
Right. I really like that analogy actually about fire because I was thinking about how when you have a campfire or a fire, you have to monitor very closely. Right. Because it can rage out of control pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
Because of how powerful it is and how useful it is and how much, people rely on it. And so, I think that's a fantastic analogy because it's not good, bad, right, wrong. It's like, this is a thing that needs to be monitored carefully. It's very powerful. It's, so.
Right. I remember we were having grilling out with neighbors and it was summer a few years back and it got dark. Yeah. And so there was this, wasn't a grill, it was a fire pit, I think.
Okay, sure.
And the neighbors' kids were playing.
Yep.
And they're just playing catch and running around. It was so dark you couldn't see the fire pit anymore. Sure. And there were embers. I mean, it wasn't a fire, but there were embers there. And a kid tripped and fell into it. And he started screaming. We all just jumped up. And I think that's a powerful analogy, especially with children, because what we'll get into in another podcast, the negative effects upon them.
Right.
So we all need to be vigilant, and we need to be talking about this.
Sure. Totally. So do you want to get into the problematic kind of piece?
Let's talk about that.
Because we're kind of talking about fire and getting burned, and so I think it's a good transition.
It's a good segue.
Yeah, and so earlier you had mentioned the pleasure center in the brain, right? So there's something about pornography that activates or hits on something in the brain. Is that kind of what's going on there? Is that where it can get kind of addictive for people?
Well, absolutely. When we have sex, we get all these different chemicals that are released in the brain. We always say our greatest sex organ is between our ears.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's hard to get aroused without engaging your brain. And then when there is arousal, there's all these chemicals. There's dopamine, there's adrenaline, there's all sorts of them. And one is also called oxytocin.
That's what it was. Okay, so oxytocin.
Yes.
Yeah.
The bonding chemical.
Okay.
That's what's released in the first year and a half, that annoying phase when you're when you're going through it, like everything's, unicorns and rainbows, right?
Okay. Like, do you mean like a new relationship?
Yeah, I'm sorry. A new relationship. Yeah. Everything's great. And when you're going through it, everything's wonderful.
It's the honeymoon phase.
Right. Yeah. And then if you're watching a couple go through that, it's like, okay.
You're like, calm down.
Yeah, dial it back a little bit here. But what is that? It's powerful. It's oxytocin. That tends to be released more in that year and a half. Yes. And that's that bonding chemical that's released when people have sex.
Yes.
So oxytocin is the bonding chemical, and it's highly pleasurable because it's also connected with all these other chemicals in the brain. So now think about that. When someone is having sex, there's this oxytocin that's released.
Yep.
And it's like, oh my gosh, this was amazing.
I feel so good right now.
Right. Yep. And so a little tangent, what I see is when couples have a really difficult relationship, but they can't get out of it for some reason, is because they're always having sex to try to deal with the emotional, relational components.
Yes, and keeping them bonded.
Right, yeah. The oxytocin is released, and they're like, well, this must be love.
Because we can't stop, or we can't leave each other. We always keep getting pulled back together.
Right. It must be credible, but we think it's credible because of the chemical.
Right.
And so we keep chasing the chemical rather than chasing the connection. Now, in porn, think about that. When people are viewing porn and they have this oxytocin being released, What are they bonding to? They're bonding. I like to tell clients, you're bonding to pixels, not people.
Well, actually, so as you were talking about the bonding aspect of it, I started to actually right here, just sitting here, feel like I felt sad because I was thinking like I was picturing, someone kind of alone at home at the computer screen and that bonding experience, but like who's there?
Right.
No one's there.
Right.
And again, not sad in a judgmental way, but again, just like clearly what that person is looking for is connection. Right?
Right. Yeah. And oftentimes that's what it is. I'm looking for that connection.
Right. And I think especially, our world, more and more, we're on our phones, we're on our screens, we're connecting with the pixels, so to speak. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an easy go-to because it's just right there at your fingertips. You barely have to look for it, So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. We can talk more and more about how this can become addictive, and we're sort of alluding to that already because there's this law of diminishing returns where I remember the first time I held a girl's hand. Boy, was that exciting. Went to Skate University, roller skating place, Moonlight dance or whatever it was, and it was very exciting. Of course. I'm not kidding. They had this disco, what do you call those? Crystal balls, and it was shining on the floor, and I kept falling because it looked like the floor was moving. I was so embarrassed. But the moments I wasn't falling, I'm holding her hand, and I'm thinking, this is the greatest thing of my life. I think I was 28 when I wasn't 28. Probably closer to 8 than 20.
You got me. I was like, what?
But it was, I think my hand sweat so much. I was so excited.
Yep.
Holding hands.
Yeah.
And that didn't last.
Yeah.
The return on that, it was diminishing over time. Holding hands, well, it wasn't that exciting all the time anymore. Now, that's what can happen in porn is people start with soft porn and it's very erotic and arousing. And yet then over time, there's like this neural pathway that's being broadened in the brain.
Yes.
And as it broadens, it's saying, I need more.
Yeah. The tolerance you start to build that tolerance, right?
Right. Yes.
Right. So I want to just mention one thing since we're kind of hitting on the addiction part of it. And you had mentioned, so we've talked about oxytocin, kind of the bonding chemical that just feels amazing. Another is dopamine, right? Which cocaine is another chemical, another drug that can really give that hit and that rush of dopamine.
Right.
So one of the things I learned about pornography a few years ago is that they've studied the areas of the brain that get, both the intensity with which they light up with pornography and cocaine, actually, and they compared them because they wanted to see, okay, is there any similarities here with these brains in how they react to cocaine and how they react to pornography, and they were almost identical. Right. So the hit, the rush, so actually it has been compared to it's as addictive as cocaine.
Right. And so an important point for people to remember is that if my intimate partner is watching porn all the time, this is why they're doing it. And it's so hard for the intimate partner to not conclude it's about me.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's a big thing in relationships. Yes.
Right.
Where it's like, why are they watching porn? Am I not good enough for them?
Right. And again, they're being bonded because of that oxytocin, the bonding chemical in the brain. They're being bonded to a pixel rather than a person.
Right.
And it's not about you as the intimate partner.
Right.
It's not so much a rejection of you, just as if a person were addicted to cocaine or something else.
Right.
What I like to tell people is it's not about the sex. We make everything in our culture about sex. And the solution is better sex. Well, we'll talk about what to do more at the end. But I think it's important to realize it's not about the sex.
Okay.
And it's this addiction.
Yep. The chemical, it seems like to me it's more about that chemical rush, right? More so than it's because of my partner doing something wrong or I'm bored with my partner. It's not that. It's
people might say that. They might say, I'm bored in the relationship.
Sure,
I'm bored with our sex life.
True.
And so the solution is sex rather than the solution being, let's look at the relationship.
Right.
I mean, it's easier to just say, well, let's do something different sexually than let's look at how we need to connect more emotionally.
Right.
So I think that's really important. And we're not saying everybody, if you watch porn, you're going to become addicted.
Sure.
We're not saying that. We're just saying that there are things that happen in the brain. And when you think about pornography, it's different than other things we can get addicted to. Because pornography, it's incredibly available, it's anonymous, and it's cheap. A lot of other things people get addicted to, it's not readily available. It's not cheap, and it's not anonymous.
Well, going back to, I was just thinking the same thing, because going back to your example about the partner, when someone's partner is using pornography, and you were saying it's important to remember about, it's the chemicals, it's not personal, it's not about you, partner, right?
Right.
That person, if they were to be doing lines of cocaine, that's way more like, whoa, what is going on? Like clearly there's something going on with you. Right.
You would say this person's got a problem with cocaine. It's not about me.
Back to your point about cocaine is illegal, I'm pretty sure.
As far as we know,
as far as we know, expensive and more difficult to procure, I would think. Whereas you were saying, porn is right there at your fingertips. It's cheap. Basically, it's free, right?
Yeah.
And there's not the same stigma about, I have to sneak around to get it, or I have to know a connection.
Well, look at how prevalent it is, right?
Exactly.
I mean, just about every other man is watching porn pretty regularly.
Yep.
So it's happening all the time. People having cocaine, it's not nearly as prevalent.
Yep. So far, we definitely know it's highly prevalent. It can be addictive. So, why talk about this? I mean, so it's kind of like, okay, we know we have how common it is. We have why it can be addictive. What are some of the things that make it sort of, from a mental health perspective, why quit? Why stop?
Well, a number of things. One is that there's research that indicates it will increase in a marriage, it will increase chances for divorce.
Really?
Right. So according to one study, it was called Till Porn Do Us Part. It was a longitudinal examination of pornography use and divorce.
Wow.
And the probability they found of divorce, it roughly doubled for married Americans who began pornography use.
Wow.
So and other research has found that too. NPR did a short excerpt on this with the guy who's their social scientist, I guess.
Sure.
Shankar Vedantam. I'm murdering his name.
That's okay.
But he said he found that married men and women who use pornography, they're more likely to get divorced than men and women who do not.
Wow.
Researchers are saying this, and that porn is a driver in making relationships worse and increasing the risk of divorce.
That is fascinating. I actually did not realize. I kind of had a vague idea, it's probably not great in a marriage, but again, without really knowing what are the stats, so that's super helpful.
Right. Yeah. And a lot what I hear from, and it's usually women in a relationship, they'll say, well, he has his needs, and that's why he watches porn.
Sure.
Because he has his needs, and I think, inherent within that, it really highlights another problematic area.
Yep.
Is that in porn, it's not reality.
There you go.
We view it as it's reality TV, and so a partner might be looking at that saying, I can't measure up to this.
Right.
And if this is your expectation and you watch this all the time, I can't do that. Totally. And so it really becomes a point where then maybe a partner says, well, you've got your needs. Yeah. And then by saying you've got your needs, I'm going to be okay with you watching porn. What does that do? That reinforces this unrealistic idea of what sex is.
Right.
And then reality comes in.
Right.
And the one who's viewing porn comes into the bedroom to have sex. And reality just doesn't live up to what's happening in porn land.
And to go back to the chemical aspect, that it's possible that the person who's habitually using porn has this tolerance, right?
Yes.
And so now it might be even more difficult to just enjoy the time with your spouse.
Absolutely,
right? Yep.
Because it's not as arousing as this unrealistic portrayal of sex.
Yes,
that's often in porn.
Yep.
And then what can also happen is that there's studies that show that there can be an increase in infidelity and affairs in a marriage because if this isn't satisfying my sex life, I'm going to go do something. And an affair can have this kind of extra arousal to it because I'm sneaking around, and it's more erotic for somebody that way. Also, because of what you're talking about, that there can be this decreased relational sexual satisfaction.
Right.
And the one who views porn, often the man, has difficulty becoming excited and aroused for sex in the bedroom.
Right.
Because it just can't live up to pornography.
And the other aspect of that is with porn, it's such a solitary, it can be such a solitary thing. You don't have to communicate with anyone. You don't have to, express your needs to anyone. You're just kind of on your own in your own little world, right? So then when you go to be with a partner, now it's, okay, you can't read my mind. You don't know what I want. You don't know what I'm looking for, right? But I'm so used to when I'm at my computer, it's just whatever I want, right?
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Because really porn is fantasy.
Yep.
And it's really about pleasuring oneself.
Yep.
And so, and it's fantasy, and who's the main character in fantasy?
Right.
The person.
The person, yeah.
Right. So then sex becomes a very me-oriented activity.
Exactly.
You exist for me, just like this person did for me in viewing porn.
Yep. I've had clients, well, actually not even just clients, but even like people I know in my own life who have said, who have struggled with pornography and said, I can't become aroused with, my partner because I've relied so much on this pornography thing. And so now, but they're like shocked by it. And they're like, what? This makes no sense. Like, of course I want to be intimate. Like, so it can be very disturbing for people, I think, because again, and part of why we're just presenting the information is just to, kind of say like, yeah, this is kind of part of the deal here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it really kind of in short summary, it can turn our sex in the bedroom, for instance, into performance. It really distorts reality.
Yep.
And then, as we touched on too, it creates self-doubt that goes both ways. For the one who is having their intimate partner watch porn, they're having self-doubt because I can't live up to this.
Yep.
And as you were just talking about, the one who's watching porn can't get aroused, and now they feel shame for maybe watching porn and shame that, I can't perform here anymore.
Right. Yep.
And then what's the solution? Sex.
Yep.
And I'm going to go watch porn more.
There you go.
So,
there you go.
But it can foster a pattern of deception then too, because of that shame.
Right. Yes, where I'm hiding it and I'm doing this secretly and my partner may not even know. Right.
Right. Yeah. So much of it is hidden, which I think I'd like to talk a little bit in our time that we got left is, all right, so what do we do?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
So, because we're talking about the shame aspect, and I really want to encourage people that are listening we're trying to normalize that this is a behavior many of us are engaged in, and it can become very problematic. And what makes it really exponentially harder to deal with is bringing shame into it. The shame I feel that my partner's watching this, the shame of the one who is watching it. Shame will not do anything to help the situation.
Right, exactly. Yep, and I try to remind myself and clients with any behavior, the question is always not about good, bad, right, wrong. It's what need is getting met by this behavior, right? So that could be shopping, that could be gambling, that could be, scrolling on TikTok, that could be anything. But it's like, okay, let's take the shame out of it and just set that aside for a moment. And what need is getting met, right? And that usually helps people. And it even helps me too with everything that I do is like, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? So once we can look at that, it's like, okay, now you can start to look at and say, is this working for me?
Right. So we move from what's wrong, a mentality of what's wrong with you, why do you do this? Or what's wrong with me, why do I do this? To a different mentality of, well, it makes sense that I do this.
I'm getting something.
I'm getting something out of this.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because we're self-medicating, and we do it, like you're saying, in so many areas. I self-medicate on carbs and sugar. I mean, it's so effective. It brings down the stress.
For sure.
So anytime, again, stressed, I think of the acronym SHALT, stressed, hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Nice.
We'll throw B in there for bored. Mm-hmm. We're vulnerable, and we all look for things in our culture to self-medicate us. So understand that for those that are listening, that's what's happening. We're just, like you're saying, we're just looking for ways to have our needs met. And sometimes it's not about stressed, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, bored. Mm-hmm. Like you alluded to earlier, it's about connection.
Yes, exactly.
And I don't know how to find this connection in a real relationship. I find it in this fantasy world here. And, it's funny because we see this with more and more with teenagers in social media and gaming, and they're connecting with this fantasy world more than they do with reality. That's another whole topic.
No, but I can't wait to talk about that.
Again, it's about shame that we need to pivot from. Mm-hmm. And remember, it's not about the porn.
Okay.
It's not about the porn, because people are engaging in continual porn usage because they're chasing the chemical.
Yes.
Rather than chasing a connection.
Yep.
And that's real. And that's what feels incredibly credible, is there's this release of dopamine and oxytocin and other chemicals. And because I'm having this experience, it must be valid. It must be credible.
Right.
And I don't have that in the bedroom. Mm-hmm. So my brain says next time I am stressed, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, bored, or I'm looking for a connection, the brain says, I know where to go to get that.
Yep.
So I'm going to go to porn, and it's right there anytime I want for my needs. Mm-hmm. It doesn't tell me how I'm a bad husband or a bad wife.
Right.
It tells me how wonderful and awesome I am. Mm-hmm. And so the brain is so powerful, and it's saying to us, whenever we're in those elements of stressed, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, go to porn.
Yeah, exactly.
And why? It's not that we're looking at porn, even though we think that's the issue. It's really we're chasing the chemical when we need to be chasing the connection. And that's what I find with couples is when they're having problems sexually and they want to talk about that, I'll say, well, what have you tried to do? And well, they'll tell me different things they've tried sexually. And so I try to help them understand. And I haven't come across research on this.
Sure.
But I will say this.
Okay.
100% of the time with clients, this is what's going on.
Okay.
They try to deal with the physical issue of sexual problems in the relationship by focusing on sex.
I see. And we just have to change what we're doing sexually or something.
Learn some new moves or something like that.
It's always about,
We're going to get a book, or we're going to watch
game.
porn, or we're going to play a game,
right?
So we're going to deal with the physical problem with some physical intervention, if you will.
Sure. Yeah.
And that doesn't solve the problem because that's not the problem. The problem with the physical or the sexual is usually predicated something before, which is emotional and relational.
Sure.
So I say, like, we are people that are designed to connect emotionally with people.
Yes.
And when we have a connection emotionally and relationally, it just naturally comes out. It's naturally expressed.
Right.
So, like, I saw a guy, a friend of mine, great guy, and I said hey to him, and my son watched that. He's like, you guys practically, like, were, in a relation, like in a physical relationship there, because he's like, so you guys hugged each other, you kept patting each other on the back, you punched each other in the arm, and that's what we do. And I try to tell my couples this. Notice, like, I try and speak to the guys, like, notice Brett Favre, okay? He's kind of like one of the more manly kind of men that men can relate to.
Okay.
But notice when his team, when they scored a touchdown, they accomplished something together. It was a culminating event, and they're so excited. After all those practices, after all that blood, sweat, and tears, after all the sacrifice and pain, they accomplished something together. And like Brett Favre wouldn't say, I think I want to express myself physically now. Right? He just takes his helmet off. He runs down the field. Yes. He goes, he tackles a guy. He's smacking guys on the rump, and he's hugging people. And guys do that. It's totally. Because what? There's a relational and emotional connection.
There you go.
That naturally has an expression physically.
Sure.
And so when relationships are having difficulties physically, the solution is not physical. The solution we need to back up and say, all right, what's relational and what's emotional here?
Nice.
It takes a lot more work than just quickly and anonymously and cheaply getting on porn for 15 minutes.
Right. So if we had to kind of summarize, like, what do I do, right? So I think so far it's been awareness. Be aware of your behavior. Again, with any behavior, if you find yourself repeatedly going to something and you're needing more and more of it and it's not giving you what you ultimately want, just be aware of what's going on. So that's first. The next thing it sounded like was to try to take the shame out of it and just focus on, all right, what am I looking for? Like, what is it that I am after here? Right. And then also, I think an important tidbit in there is realize that it's not about sex, right? When it comes to, if you're using porn and you're worried you might have a problem, realize there's something going on there that is a very human need that you're after, but it's not about sex per se.
Right. Yeah.
If my connection.
Yeah. If my indicator lights on my car are telling me, fuel is running low, that doesn't mean, I just got to hit the gas more. It means I got to pull over. I got to do
more of
something.
The same.
Right? Yeah, more of the same.
You're going to hit the wall real quick.
So I want to give one resource for people that I found really, really helpful. Yep. Okay. And I don't want the name of this resource to throw people off. It's not morality concerns kind of come up. Okay. But it's XXXchurch.com. That's XXXchurch.com.
Okay.
They it's a Christian ministry thing, and they are not heavy-handed at all on the shame aspect. It's just the total opposite.
Okay.
Trying to take the shame out of this. And they do a great job for men and women to get, if they're finding they're addicted to porn, they've got like a 30-day program that you can do just anonymously by yourself. Nobody, you're not getting this package in the mail, to your house that says, okay, you're porn addicted and here's what you do. So it's relatively inexpensive, and the content it's really rooted in research. It's rooted in neurologically what's going on in the brain. It's very affirming. So actually, the true story, the founder of that, XXXchurch.com, Craig Gross, formed a relationship with Ron Jeremy, who was the #1 male porn star.
Wow.
And they used to debate each other on college campuses whether or not porn is helpful or bad.
Wow.
And they actually became good friends. And Ron Jeremy, this was on ABC News. He had a heart attack, and the first person he called when he had a heart attack was Craig Gross.
Who's the founder of
XXX Church.
Wow.
And so I just really want to encourage people. They've got a ton of resources. Many of them are free. And just start talking to your spouse or come talk to a therapist.
Yep. I'm going to throw one on there too, just because. There's anonymous programs for just about anything you could think of. So Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. There are Sex Addicts Anonymous groups. There are Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. There's Sexaholics Anonymous. So there's several groups. So just basically any combination of the above. And these are groups that are free. There's often online ones. I think people worry about showing up in person to one of these and saying like, what if I see someone I know? So there's a lot of phone meetings. There's virtual meetings. I mean, it's like, that's one way that Google's going to be your best friend because it'll pop up with everything you need.
And those are great because like you said, they're all free of cost and they're free of shame.
Free of shame, exactly. So, this was really helpful, Brett. Thank you.
Well, we will tee this up again because we'll talk about, on another time, we'll talk about its negative effects that can happen with kids and teens.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, everybody, for listening in, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.